There's another Caitlin Nichols, and that needs to be Darren.
Okay. I can't change that now because I have made Francis the host.
I mean, that's okay. I'm fine with being Darren. Being Darren is better than being me, honestly.
I'm sorry.
He's a musician.
Mark, I've made you host if you need to make any changes.
Okay, thank you. I can't find the other. Okay, I'm done. I do believe.
Now he's Bob Funk.
You got it right. We're all good. You're all right.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yay.
Thank you, Francis.
Don't forget to switch me back, please.
Is Ms. Hernandez going to be in PrimeGov?
Okay, let's get this.
Brenda, are you able to log in to PrimeGov?
Yes, I'm in there now. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. I'm in there.
Have you joined live meeting?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And Mr. Pace, are you getting into PrimeGov?
I am not. I'll do a voicemail.
Okay.
Vote.
Okay.
Vote.
Okay. Well, we're getting I'll go ahead and we're going to start the meeting in just a moment, but I've got a statement to read. Mark, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us for the MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board meeting, conference meeting this morning. We have a few announcements to make regarding the video conference meeting. If the video conference is disconnected at any time during the meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once the audio-video connection is restored. If communications are unable to be restored within 15 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued at 11:30 today, March 4th, 2021, via video conference. The agenda and documents are located on okc.gov. To speak on a certain agenda item, please call or text your request in advance of the meeting to 405-205-4195. Include your name, the agenda item number, and the reason you would like to speak. Please submit your request prior to the beginning of the meeting, so now, to avoid receiving your request after your item has been considered. City staff will attempt to submit requests received during the meeting to process them to the meeting chair. To speak under comment by board, staff, or citizen, please call or text 405-205-4195. Again, please list your name, address, phone number, and the subject on which you would like to speak. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you would ask all members to activate their video.
Okay. Please activate your video. All righty. So we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. And our first item is to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2021 MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board meeting. Do we hear a motion or second? Okay, please cast your vote.
Hey, Teresa, before we do, I have a couple of
Oh, I'm so sorry.
corrections to make
Okay, comments. Thank you, Bob.
to the minutes. Noticed on the first page of the minutes under presentations, paragraph A, in the very last sentence, it's listing the budget. And it gets down to the very last item, $21 for operations. And I don't think that is a correct number. And I'm not sure what the number is that goes in there, but it struck me as not being.
Yes, sir. It's a little more than $21. So
I would
it's,
hope so, but
I believe it's 21 million.
okay, yeah, if we could add that in.
Okay,
And then under presentation B on the transit plan, the second paragraph, again, itemizing the budget breakout. There are two items that are listed as enhanced bus system. One for 60 million, and then it follows enhanced bus system, 12.6 million. So I think there's a misdescription on one of those items, and I don't recall what the correct terminology would be, but that again seemed to be incorrect.
David, do you recall what the correct?
Yeah, instead of the 60 million on enhanced bus system should be BRT, the bus rapid transit, as the total project.
Okay, if we can just make that correction in the minutes.
Okay, anything else, Bob?
No, that's all I saw.
Okay, any other questions, corrections, comments on the minutes?
Madam Chair, that's actually wrong too. It's the overall transit system budget of 60 million. So it's that part of MAPS 4 that is transit.
Okay,
It's not all of the rapid transit. It's just
Right.
transit, which includes the BRT. It includes the enhanced bus stops. It includes the land, the equipment, all those things.
okay. Thank
Well, I
you for,
apologize for that.
no, thank you for the clarification. And Bob, thank you for catching that.
Can you repeat that? That's the entire budget, in transit budget?
Yeah, I'm looking to make sure I didn't misspeak again.
Yeah, Mark, David, the numbers in there is 60, 12.6, 9.6, 5, total up to the 87.2 million.
Right. So I misspoke again. Haven't got all these numbers memorized because there's a lot of things to memorize. So the entire budget is 87 million. The 60 million is for the advanced transit,
Okay,
which does include the BRT piece of it.
but it's more than just the BRT.
Yes.
Okay,
It's also park and ride and microtransit and some future planning and stuff. So let's just call it the advanced transit.
Yeah, and David, I just now noticed, I hadn't even noticed it before the $12.6 million figure, there are $2 signs. So while we're in the process of,
And you're on fire today, Mr. Nealon.
well, I have to confess, I usually don't spend quite so much time with the minutes, but I was
Apparently,
bored today. It was a pretty,
I didn't either.
glad you did. Thank you, Bob.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as amended. So please cast your vote.
Mark, this is Kevin. I don't have any voting buttons on my screen, but I'm a yes.
If you'll hit escape, it'll come up. It should come up.
Well,
This is Russell. I vote yes.
I still don't have that marked, but you've got my vote.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay. The motion's approved. Thank you all.
This is Lisa. I need Ms. Hernandez and Ms. Morris.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't know what's wrong with my system today, but I mean, I'm seeing the screen and the yay is in green.
yeah, I
But
see.
I'm not
both.
sure why it's not recording.
I'm
Yeah.
seeing that both Morris and Hernandez have voted, have cast their vote.
Oh, I don't see that on my end. So are they both yes?
Yes.
Shay? Okay, yeah. Okay, great. Now, the motion's passed. Whew. All righty, so moving on. The next item on our agenda is the revenue and expenditure report. So David?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. So you have the revenue and expenditures report for the period ending January 31st, 2021. On the revenue side for the month, there's $9,826,762. Previous collections of $66,391,089 and a total revenue of $76,217,851. And then on the expenditure side, you'll see that previous expenditures of $220,222, and that's all that we've expended, and that has to do with administrative costs. And I'll try to answer any questions anybody might have.
Okay. Let's get a motion in a second and then open it up for discussion. Okay, great. Thank you. So discussion, Shay?
I was wondering last time, how do we pay for the services of the consultants?
Well, the consultant right now is ADG, and that's the bulk of that $220,000 that's on there.
Oh, okay. So it's just divided up in between the projects. I see. There's not a separate line item just for.
Right. We
That
allocate
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah, we allocate it to each of the groups of projects on a
Okay,
percentage
thank
basis.
you.
David, a follow-up to Shay's question, are those allocations of expenditures for ADG just broken out by the percentage that each of the projects has to the total, or do they really itemize how much time they're spending on particular projects?
Well, they're budgeted based on the percentage, but they are itemized.
Okay,
It's bill.
all right, thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I don't think I voted on that, and I don't see buttons.
Okay. I haven't called for the vote yet, so you haven't voted,
Oh.
but
Okay, I thought,
no, that's
But
fine.
we do not show Ms. Morris connected to Prime Gov, the live meeting.
Okay. I'll ask
Okay,
if you've got the buttons, the radio buttons to cast your vote, and for any that we need to take a verbal vote.
This is Russell. I vote to approve.
Okay. The motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Todd, for that presentation. All righty. So our next item, I'm sorry. Our next item for consideration is recommendation for approval of the request for proposals, project M4 PR002 for the MAPS4 Program Public Relations Media Consultant. And I believe, David, are you going to speak to this?
Yes, ma'am, I can. So each of the MAPS program has had, well, I know that MAPS for Kids and MAPS 3 had PR consultants, and it was done in different ways, but we're choosing this time to contract directly with them. And this is a request for proposals out to the public for PR firms to submit their proposals that will be reviewed by a panel, and then we'll recommend somebody to be our PR rep. Now, what this does is it takes burden off of the city public information office, because they're dealing with, as you know, in the last 2 weeks, snowstorms and water outages and street problems and tornadoes and all that stuff. So we employ our own public relations person. And that isn't just somebody who shows up on TV. This is somebody who's going to help with the logo development. They're also going to be the people that keep our social media accounts. So a lot of you have probably seen Maps 3 Twitter page, Maps 3 Facebook page, and all the great content that comes out on that. And that's what this organization will do for us, is to make sure that is all pushed out there. We're getting all the good news out. And then sometimes we get questions and comments from that, and they interact with me to get answers to those questions. So the PR consultant will be doing a lot of things kind of behind the scenes, but being our public relations rep.
Yeah. And I know from Maps 3, it is so important to have that separate, unique, dedicated resource for both the good and the difficult conversations as well. So
Right. And I didn't even add the great ribbon cuttings that we'll be doing and the groundbreakings. All those things take a tremendous amount of organization, and they'll also be helping us with that.
great. So I'd like to, a motion and a second.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
This is just to approve the request for proposals. How do we have a sense of how many proposals we'll be looking over? Will we get to see multiple proposals and then decide from there, or will you all recommend a proposal to us?
Well, this will be sent out through our regular bidding process as if it were a construction project. So it'll go out to the public through this bid sync program. And then whoever wants to respond can. So we might get one, we might get 40. And then there's a panel that will go through those proposals and decide if they're so close, there's 3 or 4, we might do interviews. But if there's a clear leader in it, we'll just recommend back to this board that we negotiate contract. So it's a process.
David, is there an anticipated budget for this? Or are we just waiting to see what the range of proposals is?
Yeah, it'll be a negotiation, and it's kind of, well, it is built into the administrative costs that we're taking out of each of the projects, just like it was in Maps 3. So while we don't have a specific budget per se, it will be a negotiated item.
Okay, thank you.
And
Ellie, did you have a follow-up question, Ellie?
yeah, just quick follow-up. Who sits on the panel that reviews the proposals?
There's, it's prescribed by policy within the city that certain people sit on it. I'm trying to find that. So it'll be myself. It is a person from finance, which is because they do the purchasing stuff on here. We've also added 2 people from this board that will be appointed at a later time with Ms. Rose Crook, her guidance. There's a member from the city manager's office. Gosh, I don't know why I can't find that. Yeah, so the as I said, the MAPS office, me, advisory board representatives, public information officer within the city, a representative from finance, and a city manager designee, which is usually the assistant city manager.
Thank you.
Very similar to how we do all the other bids and proposals.
Great. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Seeing none, if we could cast your vote, and those that are making an oral vote.
Mr. Russell, I vote yes.
All good.
Don't show that Ms. Morris has voted. Do you?
Yes. I showed that she's voted. All righty. Thank you so much. So the motion passes. Okay, so now we'll move to item 5A under presentations. The presentation on the maps for multipurpose outdoor stadium. And I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Bob Funk. And thank you for being here today. We appreciate your time, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation. I'll let Darren get set up here very quickly.
Just want to check that we can see the maps presentation screen.
I can see it, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Darren. So again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. It's been an honor to be invited and to present among so many impactful projects and ideas that are going to change and improve the city that we all love. I grew up here, long believed that Oklahoma City has the potential to be great, a great piece of the fabric of Oklahoma and the United States. But I really believe that we can only achieve that potential when we connect inside our communities and support one another through collaboration. So as you all know, not long ago, we were not necessarily a big league city, but 28 years ago, we took the opportunity, took a historic step to vote yes on the first MAPS program. And that was a choice that would forever change the trajectory of Oklahoma City's quality of life. The Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark, where the Dodgers play, the Ford Center, or what was then called the Ford Center, is now the Chesapeake Arena, really it positioned us as a city to attract a big league franchise. That monumental achievement would have never been possible without the forward thinking of our leadership at the time. And I think we can all agree that the Thunder has really put Oklahoma City on the global map. And that combination of intentional, future-focused public investments, along with our passionate, committed operators and tenants, have really driven a lot of private investment over the last few decades. In fact, according to the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, Oklahoma City has benefited more than $5 billion in new and public and private investments since the initial MAPS passed in 1993. And today we're watching MAPS 3 materialize before our eyes. The Oklahoma City streetcar, the senior health and wellness centers, the convention center opening its doors last year. These achievements have undoubtedly contributed to the passion you've encountered through the MAPS 4 process. Thousands of ideas, emails, feedback you've received during this process and the original process, the overflowing council chambers during the presentations. The message has been loud and clear, carried by a cacophony of diverse voices that Oklahoma City still has more work to do for our people. It's also clear to me that our city looks very different today than it did 28 years ago. Our median age is younger. We've grown significantly. As of 2017, 19.1% of our population is Hispanic. And even more indicative of our future trends, 53.2% of OKCPS students are currently Hispanic. In 23 years, Caucasians will be the minority in Oklahoma City. It's undeniable we are now a community of immigrants and will be and will continue to be in the foreseeable future. And those interests and preferences are being influenced across Oklahoma City by that increasingly diverse cross-section of global cultures. To me, I really because I love Oklahoma City and I love the global nature of it, I really want to celebrate it, but I know that we also have to plan for those changes, those cultural changes over time. And this, for me, is where soccer comes in. For me, soccer is the future. Soccer is the most popular sport in the world. In 2018, the Super Bowl drew 160 million people. That's pretty significant. But in that same year, the FIFA Men's World Cup drew 3.4 billion people in terms of viewership. That's over half the world's population. That's just, nearly half the world's population. It's quite incredible, the popularity of soccer and its continued rise and growth across the world, and also in the United States. It's gained popularity here at an incredible rate. Women's World Cup in 2019 captured the attention of the nation and the world and broke all viewership records in the US. In Oklahoma City specifically, we held a watch party downtown in one of the parks, and that party drew hundreds of people on an extremely hot day. I was there on a Sunday morning to watch the victory, the US women's victory over the Netherlands. Oklahoma City sports preferences are truly shifting, and they're tracking really closely with the national trends that we see. And for example, in 2018, we took a Nielsen study and found that 862,000 of our population, that's over half of the city, 1.5 million residents, identified themselves as professional soccer fans. And that's not far behind basketball and football either. It's truly incredible, the meteoric rise of soccer. And in Oklahoma City during that time frame, in 2018, World Cup was the most Googled term during that year, due primarily to obviously the World Cup progressing during that time frame. And so it doesn't surprise me, but I've been pleasantly, the acceleration of the sport has been over the year has been pretty incredible, especially with the World Cup coming up in 2026 here in Canada, the United States. But I think it's also important to talk about the incredible growth and support that we've experienced at the Energy in the 8 years since we began the franchise. It was part of my recognition of where the sport was going back in 2010 and its growth that led me to and the appetite locally for soccer that led me to initialize the franchise here in Oklahoma City. But what I quickly grew to understand about the sport of soccer is what a uniting presence the sport can be across so many different demographics. And that further emboldened me to continue to grow the team and the sport in Oklahoma City with that idea that we wanted to unify everybody under one sports banner and across demographics, because the sport of soccer is so attractive across the multiple demographics that exist in our city. And the depth and scope of our fan base is pretty multicultural and very economically diverse. It's also multi-generational. Energy FC fans skew younger and are more heavily millennial than the city's population at large. The last number I saw was I think somewhere in the 40 to 50% range. But they're also civically engaged, which you probably saw during the MAPS 4 process, as many of our fans really engaged in that process on multiple levels and across multiple projects. And I'm really proud of that fact that when we take our surveys repeatedly, one of the primary things about our fans and why they support the Energy is that they want to support Oklahoma City itself, and they want to support new and unifying things in the city. And so I've been really, really proud of that fact. But I'm also continually inspired and also energized by the meteoric increase we've observed with our youth soccer programming. Our involvement with the youth soccer programs here and also across the city and the different suburbs, really seeing a massive growth in youth soccer all across our communities. From every different area in Oklahoma City. It's been really another thing I'm really proud of that we've been able to at least be a part of. And so in my view, the growth in the popularity of the sport of soccer is in part due to the changing demographics of our city, but also soccer's accessibility to watch and play for families from all backgrounds and incomes is, I think, really attributable to its popularity here locally. And that's something that I think we can all appreciate is its accessibility across all the demographics. And so our team and city are we're currently facing a real challenge. The Energy is the only professional soccer team in North America currently operating out of a high school venue. We're actually playing in an undersized pitch that doesn't qualify under the United States Soccer Federation standards, and that prohibits us in some areas like U.S. Open Cup and some other areas for being able to host other types of events in the facility. And the last I checked, I don't believe there's a facility in the Oklahoma City limits that has a capacity over 3,000 or 3,500 that actually could hold a regulation pitch. We've always been predominantly American football driven. And so most of the facilities that we built have been all around American football and not geared towards traditional or regulation soccer pitches. And so it's something that it underscores the need for a facility, multi-purpose outdoor venue like this, because Oklahoma City is the 27th largest city in the United States, yet we are the only city in the top 50 that doesn't have a multi-purpose outdoor venue for our citizens to utilize. And this means that we're missing opportunities, as I began to mention. And that's soccer aside. There's a lot of opportunities that our counterparts enjoy. Kansas City is being one, where we've seen these success stories of the facilities that have been built and the attractions that they've been able to garner and provide these really unifying opportunities inside their city through the venue in and of itself. And that, again, it's not just about soccer, that's about all types of sports. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I've always thought that Oklahoma City could and should and needs to compete, and we can even surpass, if we do it correctly and we build the venue correctly and design it, we can actually surpass the levels of inclusivity, the levels of community, and that connection that we can create through these events, as long as we carefully design the venue, we carefully program it, and we are sensitive to all the different cultural pieces that we can put together for these different types of events inside the multi-purpose venue. So today I'm presenting because I really believe MAPS 4 represents the best opportunity for us to take this first step for the multi-purpose environment that will serve to connect and complement all the nearby districts and attractions that we currently promote and provide access to citywide. And as with all the MAPS projects, the choice of location rests ultimately with the city. It should be carefully determined by the council, the individual consultants, and you yourselves, the Citizens Advisory Board. I've been a big believer that the location is probably as important as building the venue, probably more important. It sets everything up for success. And I think all the stakeholders in the community have to be a part of that choice. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to present to you today to talk a little bit about that. And I think that this process, as it's been dictated by precedent, that's the ideal way to come to the best decision as to what this amenity in terms of a multi-purpose stadium would look like and when the best results. And so we've worked for the past few years to lead a group in responding to the mayor's call when it was made for the MAPS 4 ideas. And we announced a proposal 2 years ago, which I'll go over at this time. And so the proposal outlines kind of our collective vision for a centrally located multi-purpose outdoor venue that can host professional sports events that include soccer, but also also professional sports such as rugby, boxing, lacrosse, any sport that you put outdoors and put it on a field. We believe, outside of maybe cricket. Cricket's probably a little too large, and it doesn't have quite the following in the States at this point. But any other thing that you can put on a field, any other sport that you could put on a field, we really believe that we can have a quality venue that can really perform across multiple different strata, not only professional, but also college level events, as well as high school, and provide for the first time a centralized location for our state championship sporting events. I'm sure a lot of you heard about the Big House and the basketball championships that happened there. I played basketball when I was in high school. Really, it was always a dream to go to the state championship and play at the State Fair Arena. We could provide that same environment for all of our our high school field events. So high school football, high school soccer, high school rugby. High school rugby is youth rugby is one of the fastest growing events or sports in the youth sports in the United States right now. Has been for a number of years and continues to grow. And I expect to see that being woven into our fabric here locally as well. But sports aside, we've also talked to some of the arts and festival groups that here in Oklahoma City, like Dead Center, the Oklahoma Cine Latino Film Festival, local music experts like Graham Colton, and each of the individuals have seen value in a development of this nature to support all types of new cultural events that would complement the current city's infrastructure and demographic landscape. So I gotta say, the slide always makes me smile because that was one of the funnest, the most fun, to use proper grammar here, the most fun parts of this this process was getting as creative as we wanted to about what the true meaning of and potential of a multi-purpose venue could be, and talking to different groups throughout the different city of how they would utilize it, how they would go about using this venue to what its purpose is, and unifying different communities and different demographics. You know, I remember a conversation, you probably saw some of maybe our presenters at council that spoke on behalf of, in favor of the project, you know, karate exhibitions, the large scale dance competitions. Were just really unique ways of using the facility that we think really promotes that overall theme of unification across the city. So if at this point, I'd like to move into more of the specifics of what the project looks like. And as a likely operator and tenant of the venue, our preferences are a centrally located venue that is located in an area that is dense in terms of a neighborhood. It's mixed use. So we not only have housing, but we all have commercial development in and around, close to it, retail, closely connected to infrastructure with bike and pedestrian friendly infrastructure in place, and public transportation. We think access, and we know this from experience based on where we're at at Taft. Access has been a significant barrier for us there at 23rd and May. People getting in and out easily really hinders us from being able to succeed in that location. And we really are confident that with the current city council would support our goals in and around access on all the different levels that we would see. And we look forward to, you know, working alongside with you and everyone else to hopefully help realize that vision. So the renderings you're looking at have been developed specifically in response to feedback and direction we received from the city of Oklahoma City. Back in February 2019, we originally proposed a $77 million to $97 million project, and that factored in land acquisition expenses. Prior to our 2019 presentation, we had a few meetings with the city in regards to that presentation, and we were encouraged to go back and revisit the proposal with cost reductions in mind. So we came back with our MAPS presentation with two concepts essentially. One for $37 to $42 million and a larger version of $67 to $72 million. And we presented both of those at that meeting. And in December 19, the votes were cast and MAPS 4 passed with flying colors. In turn, our project was allocated $37 million, as you know, and the multi-purpose outdoor event venue moved one step closer to changing the landscape of Oklahoma City. And so with these considerations in mind, I'm showing you a rendering of the $40 million version of the project. At this level of investment, the city would still be well positioned to host many of the events I've already outlined in the presentation. It would be what I would call the phase one would be an 8,000 seat stadium, which would feature a regulation size playing surface for all the different sports that we talked about, would accommodate all of those, youth through professional, soccer, rugby, lacrosse. And the venue itself in total would accommodate up to 15 to 18,000 seats for concerts and festivals with a basic stage structure on the end. And filling in the field, we think we can seat that many for those types of ancillary events. When we increase it to 70 million, quite frankly, that's when the real vision can be realized. That's when many of the other amenities that you see in most facilities really start to bloom and come into play. And those, some of those, when we increase the budget, it allows for shade structures that would expand the usability of the venue for multiple different types of weather events, whether our hot blazing summers or sometimes our rainy, the rainy springs when we have different types of sporting events. And the seat count increases to 10,000 seats at that point, which that ends at the same time being able to include some premium amenities in terms of the suites and some of the premium locations, as well as a larger stage on the end that would attract what we call A-list talent. So national touring events and different entertainment companies. That would give that larger budget would give us the ability to accommodate that. And also accommodate, more like 20 to 22,000 in the facility. So as we went through this journey at this point in time, we were contacted by Live Nation, and they communicated to us that they were interested in Oklahoma City and Tulsa as a touring stop if we pursued the proposal. And they reached out to Mayor Holt and said the same thing to him. And so we really focused on, as we put this proposal together, to not make this just about soccer. I mean, obviously, we want to be the operator of the facility. We'd be looking forward to being able to program the facility, both soccer and otherwise. But we really intentionally wanted to focus on bringing outdoor touring events, large-scale outdoor touring events, with Live Nation and other companies like or not AEG Live now, but the company that represents them, and bring those types of events to Oklahoma City, which traditionally pass through us. They either stop in Kansas, where they have the events, the event space available, or they go to Dallas, down to one of our past affiliates down at FC Dallas, down in Frisco. I at this time if you haven't had the opportunity to visit Frisco and that facility, that's a great example of a multi-purpose outdoor venue that they pursued, and being able to program multiple up to 60 to 80 different events during the year. And it's really, they've been able to build in a lot in and around there from a neighborhood and a community standpoint. But of course, the larger vision for the multi-purpose outdoor event venue is still part of the expansion conversation for the future of Oklahoma City and the venue itself. At either price point, Oklahoma City would stand to gain a venue that is suited for the present and future of our city, both in its intentionality or the additional amenities and an expandable design to add added seat capacity and additional shade structures should the opportunity arise. This is where I go back to what I deem as phase one and phase two. The 37 million gives us a really stable foundation to be able to expand later on in the future, which is an example that we've already set. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit. So as we progress through the project, we partnered with and communicated with multiple subject matter experts. So specialist contractors, architects, numerous conversation with other cities that have been down a similar road, so cities like Louisville, and Phoenix that have either are building or have built similar venues. And this current slide that we're currently viewing gives you the project estimates for both options as we presented at our initial city council meeting. And we've been through these numbers multiple times, but really fine pencil to paper, and feel really comfortable with our estimates. So long term, what does this look like? So I want to talk a little bit about what kind of our expectations are, what we think we can do here in Oklahoma City as an organization, and why we think putting a venue in Oklahoma City makes sense, and the long-term future following the path that we began 28 years ago with the facilities that we've seen continue to grow and the opportunities as organizations have continued to grow. And so I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about who we are as a league, and in terms of the USL. The Energy FC currently plays in the United Soccer League, what is called the Championship Division, which is the Division II league sanctioned under the United States Soccer Federation. Since our 10 years, since our inaugural season, from the USL standpoint, the league has grown from 15 to 31 teams that are all in comparable markets to Oklahoma City. So Austin, Louisville, San Antonio, Sacramento, Phoenix, Memphis, and a lot of other cities of the same size. But I want to remind you, Oklahoma City is still the only city in our league that plays currently in a high school stadium. And a few years ago, we took a trip with then the former mayor, Mick Cornett, to New York to talk to MLS. For those of you who may or may not know, the Major League Soccer is the Division I league here in the United States, the only Division I league. It essentially is the top tier Major League soccer league in the United States currently operating. And they've gone, since their founding, gone from 10 to 27 teams. And while they haven't publicly disclosed it, the general discussions around how big they're going to grow is probably 32 to 34 teams is what we expect. And so when we went to sit down and talk with them and said, and talk about Oklahoma City's realistic expectations to become an MLS city. And they were very clear with us that first, the really two most important things are you build a substantial fan base, first and foremost. And right along with that, you have to make a commitment to an infrastructure in and around a stadium. One that it can be multi-purpose, but must be soccer specific in order to be true to the sport and authentic to the sport. And so we took that advice back and began to work on what you see today as our proposal, so that we can stand ready at any given point in time to be able to take the next step as it would be to get to pursue a tier 1 franchise in MLS soccer. I always believe I don't ever want to rest and say, second best is good enough. I always want to have Oklahoma City shooting for the top standard and what we can enjoy. And I really think that establishing this facility here gives us that opportunity. And to be very frank, if we don't do that, if we hadn't made this decision and don't do this, that opportunity simply evaporates. The league will continue to expand and will eventually shut down. And then the only opportunity that we would have is to buy a team from another community. But we would still have to build a facility. So this puts us on a really good footing to signal to the MLS that, hey, we do believe we're a viable market, and maybe not ready today, but we will be ready for it in the future. And so a recommendation, just in summary, is that the venue be designed to allow for that expansion as based on Oklahoma City's future outlook. But just as much as it's based on that precedent that we set 28 years ago by the Ford Center's cost-conscious original design that was really more of a speculative venue to provide the framework to attract an NBA team. And once, obviously, once the NBA had committed, we took another step to significantly upgrade that facility and expand it in order to make it fit for an NBA team. And so we see that as a great framework, an incredible precedent that has shown success. And we think we can follow that model because Oklahoma City now has that opportunity to emulate it by anticipating for both the demands of our current residents, but also by taking the step, we're anticipating the demands for our future residents 10 to 20 years from now. So as I've talked through this whole presentation, hopefully I've woven in through the fabric of my discussion here are the intentionality in which the organization has pursued not only the USL team, but the establishment of this facility that the team and the facility has the power to unify and be a far-reaching force for connection all throughout Oklahoma City. I really think the building and the facility itself, the multipurpose outdoor venue, can serve as a physical manifestation of our willingness and attempt to unify our city across a lot of different cultural demographics from every corner of our city through the sport of soccer, but also all of the different outdoor cultural events that we can hold in the facility itself. I've been very proud to be a part of this initiative. I've been very proud to see fans embracing our athletes as representatives of themselves on the national stage. And more importantly, I've been honored that the team, that we created an organization, me and my partners have created an organization that serves the most, serves the communities in our city that are most in need. And the efforts that we put forth to serve everybody in a way that we think is beneficial to aid in that unification. And we've had a lot of people that have helped participating in this proposal. And we just embrace the opportunity to further take those next steps, continue to connect this community, move forward with the development of the stadium, because we really believe this is a place to bring us all together. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Bob, thank you for that presentation and going through the history as well as the planning that was put together. So I'll open it up to questions and comments.
Bob, this is Bob Nealon. In a perfect world, I would like to think big and bold and long term, and would much prefer as long time Oklahoma City and to go with your option 2 and really do a first-class facility. Really 2 interrelated questions. First of all, are there sources of funds other than MAPS 4? If we're only budgeted for 30 to 40 million under MAPS 4, which would be enough to fund option 1, but not option 2. Are there other sources of funds from the energy or other places that we might be able to supplement the MAPS 4 funds and get to the option 2 from the get-go? The second interrelated question is, if we're not able to do that, is the design for option 1 done in a way that could easily be expanded to what is option 2 5 years down the road or something like that, if additional funds became available?
So yeah, let me ask you if you're okay with me answering your second question first, and then I can answer the first one. The second question is yes. We intentionally designed the facility that we've proposed as a first best step. It will give us the ability to host the events, albeit without maybe a shade structure, but host multiple different types of events in a way that is commensurate with other facilities that we already have in market here. So the NBA facility, the Chesapeake Arena, Chickasaw, the Chickasaw Ballpark. It would be designed in a way that would be on that same level, just a lesser capacity, but we'd still be able to host all those events in that phase 1, and would allow us to have a foundation, for lack of a better word, a foundation to expand upon and to bring, if we wanted to expand the seating, if we wanted to add amenities, though the infrastructure would already be there to simply bolt on and add on at a later date. Now, in regards to the funding, my personal belief is there are other opportunities for funding in different areas. What me and my partners bring to the table is we're already investing a lot in the team in order to continually maintain and operate the team as it stands. There are other private funds that I think would be available to expand upon, but the primary, and the one part we didn't include in this presentation because we felt like this was more of a summary, was a conversation with his last name, Chuck. We had a conversation. He presented in the initial presentation. private investment could be a part of this, but it would have to be a part of a larger development in order to attract that funding. And so we've really settled on the idea that we're, in terms of Tim and I and Don and my partners, we're going to be investing for the next however many years until the stadium, this first phase of the stadium's built, in the team to keep it continually operating. And that's part of our commitment to Oklahoma City in order to get that done. I think if the 37 million is only the number we can have, we can still operate on that. And then we can look towards a further plan of how we bring in maybe a private development or private funding to help with the second phase of this, or look towards another MAPS initiative after the fact.
Thank you.
This is Mark Stonecipher, and I say this somewhat in jest, but we have a lot of vacant land in Ward 8 that you might want to take a look at.
You're not the only one. You're not the first one to say that.
But that being said, what I want to understand, trying to get to phase 2 or option 2, how much are the land costs? And I've seen things that I participated in before where developers were willing to give the land so that they could develop around the project. And so I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know how big the land cost factors into that. And then with that, we talk about what I call the TAF problem, which is just not being a regulation facility. How many acres do we need to build this?
So again, I'll start at the end and work backwards. 10 acres is what we've said is kind of the ideal to set it up for expansion later on down the line. It doesn't take up. It would take more up probably around an 8 to 9 acre 9 acres of that property. But to really be able to expand it, I think you need about 10 acres to set the property on. In terms of the cost of the real estate, that was we decided to take that out of the proposal and from our number, primarily based on the fact that we really believe that probably the most important decision that you make when you build a stadium, first of all, is placement in and around the community where it's going to be successful. I've seen many projects, and I can give 2 specific examples of cities that have built MLS facilities. One being Salt Lake, the team Real Salt Lake, Rio Tinto Stadium. We took a chamber trip there more than a few years ago. And I've put it very succinctly, that is a mediocre facility in a terrible location. It is built out in the suburbs. It was set in the middle of neighborhoods next to a convention center. It was not appropriately planned for. There's very little access to parking. There's very little access points in and out of the facility. In terms of roads, cars, there's hardly any public transportation that allows for it, allows for ease of access. And so to me, it was a real example of the things you shouldn't do. And they didn't, in my mind, didn't fully fund the stadium from an MLS perspective, and what I think an MLS team or a professional team would be looking for. You take my next example would be you take Kansas City. Kansas City is probably the prime gem in terms of the facility in and of itself is the prime gem of the MLS currently. It was 180 million that was spent. They spared no expense. It was funded primarily with star bonds. They paid off that commitment 7 years early, just based on the success of it, which was a beautiful facility, very well designed, very well done. But to me, in my mind, is in a mediocre location. It's on the west side of the city. It's right off of the highway. It's in an area that has become an entertainment venue, but only an entertainment venue in large part of 3 separate sports facilities that exist there. So there was first the track. Then there was a small baseball stadium, and now you've got Sporting Park. And so I've always looked at that saying that's a great design for a facility, but I just disagree with their location. I think it didn't maximize it. So put ourselves in our situation, and when I was asked to this on a couple different occasions, the question inevitably is, what do you think about a location? And I said, if you're gonna do it right, and you'd want to have the best facility with the best location, you got to put it in the core, somewhere near the core where there's access to other amenities. Because what we find is people don't just want to go to one event when they go out, whether it be a Thunder game, whether it be a baseball game. There's really a series of 4 events, especially for the millennial population. It's 4 events in one day. There's the early event where they may go down to the park and spend some time and just be outside at that point in time. Then there's the dinner or the drinks event where they'll go before the game. Then there's the game that they go to or the event that they go to, NBA or otherwise. And then there's the 4th event, which happens after the game. And they want access to be able to have the flexibility to do what they want to do. If they're going to spend all their time in what I call Oklahoma City's living room, downtown Oklahoma City, that's what they want to do. That's what they want to pursue typically. And that isn't always just the millennial generation. That's families too. Families relate in that way as well. That's where we're limited. So as the land cost, the reason we didn't put it into our proposals because we don't know, and we didn't feel we were being responsible in suggesting that this will be the land cost, when if collectively between yourselves, the city council, and the community stakeholders, whether that's Kathy O'Connor and her group, the business community, the local nonprofits that this could affect the surrounding neighborhoods. All those stakeholders really have to come together, in my mind, along with us as a potential operator, and be very intentional about the decision that we make, that it's going to benefit all the different stakeholders. And so when you look at it from that framework, do this anywhere. There are 3 locations that we've looked at. One being you've probably years ago, we had the PCOM property, the Producers Cooperative Oil Mill under contract. We looked at the Exchange property on the west side of Classen, just south of the farmers market area, and Wheeler Park. They all have their own challenges, but they all have their own, from the city standpoint, have a different price point. PCOM sits at a premium right now. It's, roughly in the $30 some odd a square foot for bare land. That's way outside market. The Exchange property is a little bit lower, but not much. Wheeler Park's a whole different entity because it's city owned. So in essence, it's at no cost to the city, but you have significant issues there because you have 5 city sewer junctions underneath that property. You have a moratorium on alcohol sales that's existed since the Wheeler family entrusted it to the city that would have to be solved. So they all come at a different cost, whether you look at it one way or the other. And there was no way for us to quantify that in reality to make what we thought was a reasonable suggestion back as to what the location should be or what that price, that cost should be. We felt like that we needed to leave that up to you as the stakeholders.
One other question as to cost. If Kansas City is the premier location, the premier venue, what did it cost to build that?
So it would cost over 180 million for the total project. They were given the land to them by the county as it was a part of that overall development, if I remember correctly. And then the facility was funded by Star Bonds. Star Bonds act just almost like our maps, except they're county-wide and they're region specific. And we have the ability through in Oklahoma to do this through popular vote. We've just never really taken the opportunity to do it from a statewide standpoint. But essentially what they do is they bond the construction of the stadium, and then it's based on sales tax accrual over a 25-year time period. And as that accrues, it pays down those debts. They paid that facility off 7 years early with the amount of investment and attraction that it had to the local community.
Mr. Funk, I have a question about the size of the land. Does that include the 2,700 parking spots that are in the future expansion?
We have, well, and that's a great question about the parking. We have, that is based on our projections of not 2,700 spaces, more like, I believe it was 1,500 spaces that we could supply. We have felt that if you put it in the right place in the core, and I'll give you an example, when we spec'd out the Producers Cooperative Oil Mill property, we wanted to set the stadium in the far southeast corner of that property. When we knew that parking would be an issue and we could only accommodate about 3,000 spaces, probably more like 2,800 spaces inside that 50 acres in and of itself. So we knew that wouldn't be enough. And so we felt like we were trying to solve that problem. And we were kind of had tunnel vision. We were only looking at the 50 acres. When we actually kind of spread our focus out to about a half a mile radius, and you start encompassing all of Bricktown, you encompass the ballpark, you encompass the boathouse district, the new convention center and the parking related there, the old convention center and the underground parking there, as well as the streetcar access. That number was kind of exponentiated. It went from easily 2,800 to over 10,000 parking with walkability as a part of that process as well. So that is one of the other reasons from a core standpoint. If we do it right and place it in the right area, I think we can plan appropriately with access to public transportation, the right infrastructure from a pedestrian and a bicycle standpoint, where we can mitigate the amount of parking. I'm not a big fan of surface parking in and around facilities because I think it's a waste of money and it's a waste of space. And putting parking garages doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me from an environment either. So if we could, I think if, again, we put it in the right place, we can mitigate that issue and have people get access on multiple different transportation channels.
So you don't need the 10 acres does not include the parking?
Now that would include the facility in of itself and the ability to expand it from say 10,000 seats to 22,000 seats, as well as provide the appropriate space for other amenities for the future.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hey, I have a question. So the PCOM space, sorry, where is that located?
So that's a Producers Cooperative Oil Mill. It is south of the boulevard, in between the Shields and essentially I-40 is the boundary.
Okay, great. So then all of these locations are on the south side of Oklahoma City, is that correct? That you're considering?
They're north, well, all of them are north of the river,
Okay.
south of downtown, on the south side of downtown.
Okay. Are these the sole 3 properties that you're considering?
No, it was simply when we considered all the factors involved that we felt like from our professional experience, those were the best locations. We are really open to that conversation because we want what's best for Oklahoma City. It's a founding principle of our DNA as a team and as an organization. So we're open to whatever location that all the stakeholders deem as being the best location. One thing I'm not in favor of is plopping it right next to a neighborhood. I've never seen good outcomes for the neighborhood in and of itself when you put a sports facility like this right next to a neighborhood. I think it's really detrimental and can be. If it's somewhere, in Chicago or some of the larger cities where those neighborhoods didn't exist and they grew around the facility, it's not such a big deal. But when you actively set one next to a neighborhood, you can have really detrimental effects to it. And they can take 20 to 30 years for that neighborhood to recover.
And that's what I think ADG will help with, is identifying where even the opportunities are, the options are, and then kind of down selecting given all the appropriate factors.
Correct.
Awesome. That's helpful. Thanks, Teresa. Sorry, I lost my follow-up there. Oh, I just wanted to say, yeah, you've put a lot of emphasis in this presentation on like the community impact, right, of this project. And I think it's important if we're using public dollars, there should be a public impact, absolutely. So I appreciate you considering impact on neighborhood. With that in mind, I'm wondering, are you looking solely at vacant properties or properties where you'd have to utilize any sort of eminent domain on the table as well?
Again, that would be a choice by this group to make that choice and to consider that as part of the decision process.
And then, sorry, just one more follow-up, I think, for now. You talked a lot about like potential community events that are just, I think, really appealing to me and really appealing to a lot of the folks on the council from your presentation there. I'm wondering if this might be early, but what consideration you've given to being able to do low to no cost events for community events of that nature.
Yeah, no, that definitely can be a consideration. I don't think there's any need to price the venue and price people quite frankly out of the market when it comes to community events. And when we ran the ballpark, we did that multiple times and multiple deals with certain nonprofits, other community groups. That wasn't uncommon for us.
Great.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, did you have a question?
Oh, I did not.
Okay, I thought you spoke up earlier. Any other questions? Brenda?
I actually had more of a comment. I'm excited to see this project come to life. And I do love the idea of a central location. Definitely would appeal to all areas of Oklahoma City, all of our, different neighbors. But I do love the idea of a stadium in South Oklahoma City. So if possible, if we could make everything work, let's show some love to South OKC. So.
Absolutely. And I think there are several locations down there that make sense. So like I said, we're completely open to that from our perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Brenda. Other questions, comments?
When you talk about, the necessity of being close to other amenities, when you're thinking that through, are you thinking through existing amenities or the possibility for amenities to spring up around the area?
I would say both. I think that you provide an opportunity to have both access to whatever, exchange, the exchange location. Let's use that for just a round example. It hasn't been built out yet, but we know that the city is going to move that direction. But there are already businesses, both from a retail and an entertainment standpoint, that exist there. So they would benefit, and it would complement what they currently have. But at the same time, it would cause further growth in and around that area, going back east into the Strawberry Fields development. I mean, it would help spur more development in there and create the opportunity for more amenities at any given point in time. So it would probably serve both interests.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I might just respond to Ally. I know from my MAPS 3 experience, there's a bit of a conflict between build it and they will come approach and put it somewhere where there are already amenities existing to make the project viable. And that's a very difficult decision to make. And you sometimes you try to find a compromise somehow that you play on existing amenities, and like Bob was talking about, you have to have transportation, accessibility, things of that kind. It'd be nice already to have some retail and entertainment facilities around that area, but you also keep open the possibility that you could build it and they would come, as we've seen with so many of the MAPS and MAPS 3 projects. The private development around those projects has been phenomenal. It takes time, of course. But they do come. And I think those are all things that with ADG's advice and consultation, that's the role that they play, is to put all those issues on the table for us as a group. And then eventually there's going to be a subcommittee that's going to be focused on that. And, we'll take the deep dive into all those possibilities and try to figure out what is the best option available to us at the subcommittee level, and then back to this committee and ultimately to the council. But that's the very difficult process that we have to go through, is to really try to figure out what all those factors are and what the best outcome would be given the dollars that we have to spend.
Absolutely. That's going to be the hardest job I think you have around this specific project will be that. I've got to make a comment. ADG has been with us, helping us through these concepts and projects from the very beginning. Because of I recognize working with the Red Hawks, knowing their involvement, they've really helped us develop our concept in large part, been really good advisors for us because they understand the Oklahoma City framework so well.
Okay, thank you for that, Bob. Okay. Anything else? Well, Bob Funk, thank you so much for your time and making the presentation to us today. This is another great, exciting project and another opportunity for Oklahoma City to advance and continue to grow and move forward. And I'll echo Allie's comments, and I think this speaks for the entire board. Your focus on bringing community together and seeing this venue as a way to create community by bringing all some of the diversity in our community together is really important, particularly where we are currently. So thank you so much for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's the biggest primary focus for us as an organization. It's completely through our DNA. So thank you.
Great. Okay, so next on our agenda is we've got Jason Cotton with ADG here, and he is going to present some kind of a summary of the MAPS 4 project advocate meeting. So Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. Or I guess I should say afternoon. It's good to see everybody. It's hard to believe it's been a month since we met last. February flew by. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen here this afternoon. February flew by for our team. We were really busy with the MAPS office in the month of February, working on the implementation plan. And so I'm going to back up just a little bit. You may recall from our conversation in January, we came and gave just kind of a verbal update to the board. One of the first things that we worked on right after we started on the MAPS 4 program was to sit down with each one of the project advocates kind of one-on-one and talk to them a little bit more detail about their projects. And so the presentation I've brought with us this morning to walk you the board through is really just a collection of facts and information from those meetings. And so we thought it worthwhile to, again, go through a lot of this information in some detail with you on each one of the projects. The goal really being to give you more context on each of the projects and really kind of a little bit deeper understanding on what the issues surrounding the projects may potentially be moving forward. So so that's really our presentation this morning. Just a little bit of a recap. As I said, we started work on the MAPS 4 program really in earnest in early November, and so we've been spending a lot of time on developing the project budgets and obviously putting schedules together and really just looking at the implementation plan in its entirety. And so, as I mentioned, we spent some time in January, really just a verbal update, talking to the board a little bit about our activities to date. We spoke to you then a little bit about our project advocate meetings and some of the work that we were doing on plan development. And then last month in February, we brought a presentation forward that really was just kind of an introductory presentation about the implementation plan itself, you know, the information that it would likely contain. If you'll remember, we walked you through really kind of the MAPS 3 implementation plan and what it contained, and talked to you a little bit about how the MAPS 4 plan may potentially be different. And we also talked to you a little bit just about the process in its entirety. And so we talked in some detail last month about all of those things and spent our time talking about that plan. And so, as I said, this month we're going to spend some time walking you through the project advocate meetings that we had and the findings from those. Just to give you a little bit of context, there were several things that we really wanted to accomplish with these meetings. And so, you know, really, if I were to describe for you kind of what the agenda was, the first part of the meeting agendas was largely focused on us communicating information to the project advocates. And so some of the advocates that we met with had some familiarity with the MAPS process and what to expect, but there were also a lot of groups that didn't. And so we felt it made sense to sit down with them, talk to them a little bit about what the sequence of events would be, what the city's delivery process looked like, and then also what the program would look like from the day that we were meeting with them, which, remember, this is in November and December of last year. What the program would look like from that point until the point at which the plan was adopted. You know, what kind of steps might be involved and what it would look like. And so we spent some time talking to them about that. And then really the second half of the project was us collecting information from them. And so obviously ADG has been at all the council meetings. We've listened to a lot of presentations, as you have, presentations that were given to council in the summer of 2019, presentations that have been given to this board over the last several months. And so there's a lot of information in those presentations, but really until November and December of last year, we really hadn't had a chance to really sit down with the advocates in a one-on-one setting and really kind of get down into the weeds on their projects and what their concerns or their issues or things that they needed to make sure that we understood as we were thinking about their project within the context of the program. And so we spent some time talking about that. We also tried to give the advocates an opportunity to give us input in terms of what their priorities are. And so, you know, as you may recall from all the projects, there are some of the projects where there are various components. And so, projects like transit, as an example, has a lot of different things that's included. That's an $87 million project in the MAPS4 program, but it includes things like bus shelter improvements, procurement of buses, construction of bus rapid transit lines, which we've already talked about this morning. And so if you think about that project, and this is just one example, there are several others in the program, but if you think about the transit project, we're not going to take, our intention is not to take all $87 million of those transit projects and move them forward at the exact same time. There's various reasons why that doesn't make sense, and so as we sit down to talk with the advocates, we really wanted to talk to them, you know, in my example, the transit project, the $87 million, really wanted to talk with those advocates about within that $87 million, what are the pieces that you feel like are the highest priority and maybe need to move towards the front of the schedule? And what pieces are maybe lower priority and could potentially move towards the back? And so we tried to have that conversation with them during these meetings. The other thing that we talked about is just topics that we felt like that we or they felt like might be pertinent in terms of timing of their project within the larger MAPS4 program. And so, there's various examples of this. You know, some of the advocates are operating in facilities that are maybe in disrepair or are needing additional investment. Some of them are under lease agreements. There's a whole multitude of issues that are pertinent on each one of these projects that need to be considered. And so, the meetings were really an opportunity, I think, for them to talk to us a little bit about things that were weighing on their mind that we needed to consider in terms of planning the program in its entirety. So that was really kind of the context of the meetings or the goal of the meeting. So the remainder of the slides that I have with us here this afternoon, we're really just going to step through each one of the 16 projects one by one and touch on a few key topics or findings that we had from the meetings. And so I know that each one of the board members are going to have particular projects that they're maybe particularly interested in. So I guess what I would encourage you to do is to take notes. And certainly when we get to the end of this list, we'll go back and answer any questions that you guys might have. So our first project this afternoon, Diversion Hub, just to give you a little bit of an understanding of that organization. Diversion Hub is currently operating in about a 15,000 square foot space near Northeast 10th Street and Robinson Avenue. And so we've included a map there of that area of Oklahoma City. And we've highlighted there the building that we understand that they're currently operating in. So advocates that we met with explained that their new facility may need to be as much as twice as large as that. And so something on the order of 30,000 square feet is what they're currently thinking about or anticipating. One of the things that was interesting about our meeting with the Diversion Hub is that their program has changed quite a bit since the summer of 2019. I mean, we're almost 2 years now since those initial presentations were given. We've gone through a global pandemic. They as well as some of the other projects, have really started to think differently about what they need in their space. And so, it makes them think about things like shared workspaces, spaces in their facilities for large gatherings, and even things as pragmatic as IT needs. And so we talked with them a little bit about how their needs have changed. I think the other thing that you have to recall from these presentations that were given to council and when these projects were first conceived is that in a way they were all kind of developed in a vacuum. And so as an example, the diversion hub, when they first started thinking about what the diversion hub would be, there was no MAPS 4 program. There was no official list of projects. There was no clear information for that group that there would be particular services provided to the community through these other MAPS 4 programs. And so there's some overlap in some of these projects. And so I think what we're starting to see through these conversations is that these programs are starting to refine themselves a little bit based on what they now know. There's a new set of known conditions now because of all the other projects that are going to be occurring. And so we've listed here a few of the programmatic elements that we talked about during our meeting with them. We also talked a little bit about location. And so ideally, the diversion hub would be in a location that's, proximate to the police headquarters, municipal courts, Oklahoma County Detention Center. All of these facilities are related to the mission of the diversion hub. And so really we talked with them about a location that's close to those would be ideal. We did also talk about the fact that there are other locations in downtown Oklahoma City that may also work. And so certainly as that project moves forward, location will be something that will have to be figured out. For Palomar Family Justice Center, we talked about a lot of different things. We did find out their current facility, which is highlighted on the map that you see there, is essentially about 80 years old. It does have some significant plumbing and electrical issues that Palomar is currently dealing with. They're really in about 29,000 square feet of space right now in that existing facility. And while their program has changed as well, they've started to think about how it needs to be adjusted within the context of the things they know today. As of the date that we visited with them, we were still talking about an 80,000 square foot program, so a little over double the size of what they're in today. So I guess we're providing that just to kind of give you a feel for the magnitude of the project potentially. We've listed there as similar to the diversion hub, they've started to think about how their programming might change, how COVID has impacted how they need to operate. They are, and I think they made this clear in their presentation to the board and the council, they're ready to move forward just as quickly as possible. And so they're really anxious to get this project started just as soon as they can. We do feel like, and we talked through this a little bit with them, you may remember from their presentation to council, there was an approach or a scenario described where land would potentially be donated for use of the facility. There would be a construction of possibly a joint parking garage that would provide parking needs or meet the parking needs of the facility, the new facility. And so really, as we've sat down and started studying that and talking with Palomar, it seems clear to us that the mechanics of that land transaction, of the parking lot construction, parking garage construction, are probably going to be one of the more critical aspects in making sure that that project moves forward as efficiently and quickly as possible. Mental health and addiction, we visited with project advocates on the components that you see here. Some of these the board's already going to be familiar with. Crisis intervention centers. There is an existing crisis intervention center, 2625 General Pershing. It's located out. This is immediately east of the Oklahoma State Fairgrounds, adjacent to a North Care facility. And so our understanding is that's largely going to be the model for these two new facilities that will be constructed, these two new crisis intervention centers. And so just to reiterate some of the things that have already been introduced to the board, the goal of the crisis intervention centers is really just to provide immediate needs for people who really need something to help them get stabilized, and that they're needing acute care. And so that's really what these centers will be about. The Restoration Center is really, as we've had it described to us, it's really a larger scale crisis center, but it's got a focus on addiction. And so in talking with those project advocates with that kind of mission in mind, it did come up in conversation that proximity to both the supportive housing element that's mentioned at the bottom of the slide, as well as the public inebriate, would be ideal. There's a lot of synergy that could potentially be created from all of those things being co-located. And so we talked a little bit about that. We also talked a little bit about supportive housing, a little bit more information about what that program looks like. It was explained to us that the supportive housing is really just a single room occupancy with a sink and a microwave. We're talking 300 square feet, maybe something on that order. And it's really a place just for those that are transitioning out of crisis centers or transitioning out of rehabilitation, for a place for them to land while they're recovering. And so we talked through that a little bit. We've also spent some time in the last week or two talking a little bit, and I think this was brought up in Commissioner Bloomert's presentation, but the operations of these facilities are going to be closely tied to state and federal funding. And so it'll be really important as we think about when those facilities will come online and how that is positioned within the context of the state's budgeting cycle and funding cycle. So homelessness, we spent some time with project advocates on the homelessness project. And so, you know, I think as we've started to talk about homelessness, we've started to think about the projects which may potentially be executed with the MAPS 4 funding as being somewhere in this continuum. And so we've listed here 3 separate phases or tiers of housing that we think that this money may potentially be spent on. And so, you know, I think in our description, tier 1 is kind of at the bottom of this structure, and it really it's permanent supportive housing really focuses on individuals who are actively experiencing homelessness, so those that are literally out on the street with the only belongings that they have on their back. And so really a key aspect of this first tier, and in some of these other tiers as well, is on-site case management. That's really important. We do believe that the majority of these projects that exist in this tier would, as we understand it today, would likely be spent on new construction. Now, I do think that we had a conversation with advocates from this group about the fact that the pandemic has really created some opportunities as it relates to Class B and C apartments. So there may be some opportunities for renovation of those facilities that maybe didn't exist whenever we were talking about this in the summer of 2019. And so that's something to think about. The second tier, public housing preservation, is really kind of the next step up. And so you might think about this as traditional public housing, but as we understand it, the goal is really to do that better and to provide wraparound case management services with that housing. These projects in this tier, again, this is another step removed from immediate housing needs, but you know, these projects could be renovation, they could be redevelopment, they could be new construction, could take on various forms. And then the last tier is really affordable housing. And so again, this is just another rung up. You know, people that are in need of affordable housing, you know, they likely have some resources. They may have a car or a job to help support them, but they need some assistance. They need opportunity. And so we talked about location of these projects. You know, somewhere close to downtown would be ideal. It provides access to schools and public transportation and obviously employment. And so that's a really good thing. We also talked about the model for these projects may be townhouses, multi-unit homes for rental. The thing that's interesting about the homelessness project, and I'm going to try to explain it a little bit here today. These types of projects, there are other agencies, quasi-governmental agencies out there in the marketplace that are very adept at delivering projects like this to the market. And so for that reason, and the fact that the MAPS 4 funding, I don't know if the board recalls this, but during the council presentations, there was an description of using the MAPS 4 funding as a leverage for a part of a larger funding package. And so because of that, and the fact that there's entities out there that are relatively adept at delivering these, we think that the delivery process for homelessness may look a little bit different than some of the other MAPS, kind of the traditional MAPS delivery method. So with that thought in mind, you know, I think as we look at homelessness, we think about the mechanics of the funding request, how funds might be approved, how public reports might circle back to this board and to council. I think that all of those things are really important in thinking about how we move forward on the homelessness project. We spent some time visiting with advocates on the Freedom Center, the Clara Luper Civil Rights Center. And so for those of you that don't know, the existing Freedom Center is actually operated by Freedom Center of OKC. They're an LLC organization. They were organized in February of 2020. And so they are currently operating the center as it sits today. One of the interesting things that we gathered from our meeting with their organization is this acknowledgement on their part that they need some time to build what I'll call, or what I've termed here, organizational capacity. And so, you know, obviously they have a board, they're moving forward, but they need some time to understand, you know, what their operational expenses are, what types of programming needs to be provided at the facility, really to do all of the things that you need to do and get ready to open the doors to the public. And so we discussed in some detail what they would spend this time doing and how they needed that time. They are, in fact, in the process of assembling a readiness plan. And so that readiness plan really acknowledges this window of timing that we're referring to, this 3 to 4 years. And so it was really interesting to talk through that with them and think about what's on the horizon for that group over the next couple of years. You may remember from the council presentations, this is a relatively extensive campus in Northeast Oklahoma City. And so there will be some additional land required in order to build it in its entirety. And so a lot of that property is currently owned by Okura. And so the point being here is that there is some land transactions that will need to occur. And so it's important, I think, as we think about the implementation plan for MAPS 4, that we make some allowances in the schedule so that that transaction has time to occur. For the Innovation District, we touched on a lot of topics. You know, obviously the Innovation Hall is something that's received a lot of attention in the media really since December of last year. It does seem like it's going to be part of a larger development effort. You know, as it's been described in the media, it's a really central and key component of what is proposed over there. Kathy O'Connor with the Alliance came and visited with the board last month and explained a little bit about the matching funds. If you remember, there is language in the resolution about $10 million in matching funds that would be kicked in to help that Innovation Hall move forward. And so we do feel like, and based on Kathy's presentation, that those funds may come from a variety of sources. It could be TIF dollars, could be other things. And so certainly we'll need to think about the timing of those funds relative to everything that we're trying to accomplish over there. We spent some time talking about the H.B. Foster Center. I would say for the H.B. Foster Center, probably the topic that is seen as one of the bigger challenges right now is identifying the appropriate operator. I mean, obviously programming is really important. Having the right operator for that facility is really important. And so we've talked through that about what groups may be interested in that. We've talked about the possibility that the operator may ultimately be a consortium of organizations. And so that conversation is continuing to evolve, but is certainly something that's at the top of our mind right now. We do feel like that there is some time needed for that facility, just in order to properly plan and program the facility, again, to make it as high functioning as possible, as you know, to ensure that it meets the goals of the MAPS 4 program. Also, I think related to that conversation, there are programs currently inside the H.B. Foster Center. And so the plan is for those, and you guys may be already aware of this, but the plan is for those programs to move to the Willa D. Johnson Community Center, the new community center in Douglas Park. And so that is supposed to be completed in around March of 22. And so at that time, the programs that are in H.B. Foster would move over into that space and the building would become available. We did spend a little bit of time talking about connectivity. You probably remember from the resolution, there's a lot of language in the resolution about connectivity to not only to across 10th Street, which obviously got a lot of attention during the vote and in the months leading up to the vote, but there's also some language in the resolution about connectivity to surrounding neighborhoods. And so we've started to engage with the Alliance and the Innovation District and the people that are around that project and talk to them a little bit about where that connectivity may need to occur. For the Chesapeake Arena, it's hard to believe, but that facility is coming up on 20 years. It seems like not that long ago, we were driving down I-40 and watching that building come out of the ground. And we've already talked about it a little bit this morning, but yeah, it's nearing 20 years old. And so obviously, with that age, there is some investment needed in order for us to keep up with other peer markets. And so we spent some time visiting with not only the operator of the Chesapeake Arena, which is ASM for those of you that are not familiar, but also the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so obviously those are two groups that are closely tied to things that are going on at the Chesapeake Arena. And so they seem like a really good place to start in terms of thinking about the Chesapeake Arena project. We did hear loud and clear from both groups that, you know, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, we tried to have this discussion about what priorities were within the program. And so for Chesapeake, this is a $115 million project, but there's a lot of parts to it. And so we heard loud and clear from both ASM and PBC, or the Oklahoma City Thunder, that completion of those guest-facing components was really seen as first priority or higher priority. And so We've mentioned a couple of them here in the slide. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but certainly it seems like those things will, it's more important to those groups that those things get completed sooner rather than later. We talked a little bit about the practice facility upgrades. For those of you that may not remember, there is some language in the resolution that talks about improvements at those facilities. I believe it's about 9% of the total $115 million project. And so we talked a little bit with the group about when those improvements need to be executed. And so I think we arrived at the fact that really across the summer months is the best time for us to be over there working in that facility. It's when it sees use to a lesser degree. And so we talked about that a little bit. The Chesapeake Arena project in particular, management of what I'll call temporary conditions will be key. And so obviously there's a lot of large projects that are anticipated with this $115 million. We would never go into this with the approach of ever shutting the arena down. There's simply too many things that go on in that arena, and it's really important to the city. And so as a result, the contractor that is going to be, the design team that's going to be designing the project and the contractor that's going to be executing the project, they really need to think a lot about how that sequence needs to work so that even though they're in there, possibly building the Southeast Tower as an example, that can be, if there's an event in the arena that evening, they can shut that down and wall that off, keep patrons safe. And so the arena can continue to be used while the contractor is executing the project. And so those temporary conditions will be really important in terms of this project. It is interesting to note that obviously there's not been a lot of traffic in the Chesapeake Arena since the pandemic has started, or in the last year. They are anticipating that there's going to be some higher than normal event and concert traffic, particularly in 2022 and 2023. And so I think that across those years in particular, we'll want to think really hard about what work that we're doing over there and making sure that it doesn't impact the things that are going on. There is an NBA review process that we discussed in some detail at the meeting. And so improvements that are made at the Chesapeake Arena, they will go to the NBA for review and approval. There's a set of NBA standards that have to be looked at. And so it'll be important as we're developing the plan schedule that we think about that review process and provide allowances in the schedule to allow that process to happen. So the multipurpose stadium, I don't think I need to go into much detail here because Bob did such a good job this morning. But I think a lot of the conversation that we had this morning, I've highlighted here for you on the slide. As Bob mentioned, proximity to retail and dining, other entertainment is really important to the success of this facility long term. Downtown location would obviously be ideal. I think we already spoke about the expansion a little bit this morning. I don't know that I need to belabor that, other than obviously the goal would be to design it in a way that it can be expanded in the future. Bob also talked about the United States Soccer Federation, about the pitch dimensions. And so we've tried to convey a little bit of that here on the slide. And really the land acquisition, the parking facility construction, all of that, again, we've already spoke about that this morning. So I don't know that I need to belabor that here again. For the Fairgrounds Coliseum, I'm almost quoting, I think, verbatim Mr. O'Toole's presentation from last year. The Ron Norick Arena, 54 years old, and really at the end of its serviceable lifespan. And so obviously there's a desire to get this project moving forward just as soon as possible. I did want to spend just a little bit of time. I'm not sure that this has been completely explained to the board yet, and so I wanted to take just a minute here this afternoon and do that. The phasing of the project, kind of as it's currently been contemplated, is really three primary parts. And so if you look at the site plan that's kind of in the top right-hand corner of the images on the slide that we provided, the way that the project is currently being conceived, the new Coliseum is to the south of the existing Norick Arena. And so the idea would be to construct that new Coliseum. And then once that's up and operational, we would basically demolish the existing Norick Arena. And so that's the arena is highlighted in red there. It's got a red outline on it to give you some context. And then once the Norick Arena is gone, construction of what they're calling the connector, or what's called the connector, would be done. And so that connector would connect the new Coliseum to the existing Super Barn. And so the Fairgrounds has made it very clear that that connector from a programmatic perspective is critically important. It's one of the things that makes the venue so usable for horse shows and different things that come into town, they can immediately get from the Super Barn down to the show arena. And so it's really important that that connector be executed as in conjunction with the Coliseum project. Probably one of the bigger questions on this project, obviously the resolution includes some language about $25 million in hotel tax revenues. As you might expect, hotel tax revenues have taken a dramatic hit as a result of the pandemic. And so there's some, I think, question out there right now about what the timing of that $25 million might be. And so we're starting to think about that a little bit as we put this project together and figure out a path forward. I do want to highlight for the board, some of you may already be aware of this, but design of the Coliseum project is actually currently underway. And so the design for that work was actually funded through the MAPS 3 program. And so that design team, Populous, is currently in the process of putting those plans together and refining our approach on this project. For the Parks project, we have spent a lot of time with the Parks Department talking through this. This is one of the more extensive projects in the program. I have not listed everything here on this slide that's included in the program, but I'm hitting some of the high points of the larger pieces. We've talked a lot about the neighborhood and community park, $63 million that's identified in the resolution. For those of you that may or may not know, there was an update to the Parks Master Plan that was brought forward to council in January of this year. And so that will be a really important guide to the work that's done as a part of the MAPS 4 program. But obviously the resolution also mentioned some additional community input. And so if you read the Parks Master Plan, it is largely prescriptive. It's a document that really makes recommendations about what should or shouldn't occur in parks. But the MAPS 4 resolution really is specific about the need for that community input. And so we absolutely anticipate that that will be a part of the process moving forward. We do feel like, as we understand it today, there's essentially 107 neighborhood and community parks that would be included in this set of parks that's being considered. We do feel like it's not as easy as taking the $63 million and dividing it evenly, dividing it by 107. So we believe that moving forward, there will be some approach that equitably divides these dollars across those parks. As we've looked at it, we fully anticipate that there's going to be parks that have been around for decades and have received little attention. And there's going to be parks that are relatively young that have received a lot of investment in recent years. And so the goal with this effort would be, again, to equitably divide those funds and allocate them appropriately across all the parks. And so that will be part of the process, we think, moving forward. We have spent some time talking about the adult soccer and park facilities that are mentioned in the resolution. If you'll recall, there's about $29 million identified there. Really two parks identified, CB Cameron up off of Lake Hefner Parkway, and then South Lakes Park in South Oklahoma City. And so we've, again, been talking with the Parks Department. There's really a phase of work already moving forward at CB Cameron. And so the first phase of that, about $5 million in work, is actually being funded through a 2017 GO bond. And so the MAPS 4 program will really pick up that baton and run with it once those plans are developed and ready to move forward. The improvements at South Lake Parks, as we understand it today, we currently anticipate them to include things like artificial turf, restroom facilities, expanded parking facilities. So there will be a lot of improvements that happen down there, certainly as a part of the MAPS 4 program. Related to river improvements, if you recall, there's about $11.5 million in the resolution. We do understand from, we've had some conversations with Embark. There is in fact, an FTA grant that's been awarded for the boat landing that's mentioned specifically in the resolution. And so certainly that will help us stretch those MAPS 4 dollars as far as possible across the remaining projects. We've also identified that there is some mention in the resolution about a riverbank and river adjacent public land. And so I've highlighted for you here on this slide on the left. It seems clear that there was some recommendations provided by the Oklahoma City Riverfront Redevelopment Authority, and it seems to be associated with this parcel or tract of land that's immediately west of Western Avenue on the north bank of the river. And so we're digging into that in more detail, but it seems clear that that's what was intended with the language in the resolution. We're also trying to spend some time with the Chickasaw Nation. There's, as you probably recall, there's a lot of mention in the resolution about the First Americans Museum and the work that's going on down there. A lot of the improvements in this $11.5 million are anticipated to occur in that area. And so we're in the process of talking through that with the Chickasaw Nation, visiting with them, getting a better understanding of what they're anticipating is going to happen in that area so that we make sure that the MAPS 4 program improvements dovetail with it appropriately. Sidewalks, bike lanes, trails, and street lights. And so we met with project advocates about that. For those of you that may not be aware, there is an update to Bike Walk OKC that's currently in process. We understand that that's going to be coming forward sometime in the summer of this year. And so our understanding from the planning department, really this update will acknowledge this additional funding that's coming in from the MAPS 4 program. And so there'll be some acknowledgement of how those dollars may potentially need to be spent or projects that need to be prioritized with those funds. It is, I think, a point to be made here, though, that because of timing, we've already talked a little bit about when the implementation plan may be brought forward for approval. Because of the timing of the updates to Bike Walk OKC, it's going to be necessary for that to be done before priorities can really be figured out. And so I say all of this to say, as we bring the plan forward, it's probably going to be a little bit challenging for us to sit down and identify specific corridors that are going to be worked on, specific sidewalks that are going to be constructed. We just simply will not be far enough along in that process. And so I bring that up here just to make you aware of that effort that's kind of moving forward in parallel with the preparation of our implementation plan. And so certainly they're both related, but again, we're going to be trying to reach the finish line about the same time. And so it'll be interesting to see how those details get worked out. There is a lot of discussion in the resolution about trees and art, sustainable design elements. And so a lot of our conversation at the advocate meeting really focused in on those. And particularly within the context of maintenance responsibilities. And so all of these things are great. They're things that we all would like to see in our community, but clearly investing dollars in them as a part of the MAPS program, it's important that we make sure that as we leave them, that there's someone that's clearly has a maintenance responsibility in order to take care of those expenditures moving forward. There is some mention in the resolution about the street lights. And so we talked about that a little bit with the advocates. As we understand it today, we anticipate that those streetlights would actually be completed by the utility provider. And so our understanding is that Oklahoma City will prioritize and identify high needs areas and then bring those forward to the utility provider so that they can go out and execute those projects. Getting close to the end. I know you guys are tired. Transit, we've talked about this a little bit already this morning. You can see, as I mentioned earlier, $87 million package. Some of the things that, based on our meetings with the advocates, that seem to be rising to the front of that list are the land acquisition, the planning updates that Jason Fairbrush talked about last month, and also the bus stop improvements. And so we think that within that $87 million package, those are things that will probably move towards the front of the line to some degree. We do feel like there is specific mention in the resolution about BRT, a northeast and a south bus rapid transit line. There is some time needed, we think, for route planning and also to establish operational funding. Embark will be operating those. There's operational dollars that have to be spent in order to do that, and so they need to be in a position to operate those facilities. We've also talked about, as it relates to the two BRT lines, that really we should put this program together, assuming that really there's no federal funding involved. And so, as you might expect, federal funding really drags out a schedule for a project like this. There are federal grants involved in the Northwest BRT as an example. But really, we're going to try to put this program together in a way that assumes that no federal funding is involved. And so I think to put it another way, we're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive on the schedule relative to the Northwest BRT. And certainly, as things change, as we move through the program, obviously that may be adjusted. But as of today, that's kind of the direction that we're headed. As it relates to park and ride, I did want to highlight one thing. The Northwest BRT is currently about 30% complete. There is a need for park and ride facilities adjacent to the Northwest BRT. And so I think we should start to think about The transit program, and I think we were talking internally as a team. Jason did a great job of this, Jason Fairbrush, last month. You know, Embark's capital planning is a process, and you know, every year they're marking off things off their list that they're trying to accomplish. And so MAPS 4 is really just a cog in this wheel. And so the park and ride facilities that are mentioned in MAPS 4, really there's a need to leverage those on projects that they're already underway on. And so it'd be really important, I think, as we're putting together the implementation plan, to think about that and make sure that we position those dollars in a way that they can move forward as Embark is currently identifying for us. The enhanced bus service, the advocates did identify for us, the majority of bus procurement is probably not necessary until about 2023 or 2024. And so we started to position those projects in our larger program accordingly. For the youth centers, we've talked a lot about where those locations might be. We've talked a lot, and this is in particular with the Oklahoma City Parks Department. We've talked about locating them within park facilities. There was a series of recommendations that were brought forward by OKC Play, a nonprofit organization, in the summer of 2018. And so you can see the 5 or 6 locations that are identified there. Obviously, there's benefits to doing these in the parks. Land acquisition costs are almost non-existent. Not to mention the other things that are going on in those parks. And so it's a really good, could potentially be a really big synergy between those projects and everything else that's going on in those communities. There are what we think are a handful of potential operators that may operate these facilities. You've heard Doug Cupper, the Parks Director, come and talk to you a little bit about that. We do feel like Oklahoma City Parks is absolutely an operator that may be under consideration. Right now, we do feel like it's going to be a competitive operator selection process. And so that may evolve too as we move forward, but sitting here today, that's the way that we understand that this project is going to be executed. I've included a few items here on the slide. Just again, some of these are going to be a repeat of some of the things that Doug Cupper came and talked to you guys about. Some of the items that may be included in these facilities from a programmatic perspective. And so you can see they're really focusing in on what needs the youth that are going to be at these facilities may need. For the senior wellness centers, obviously, we think that Senior Wellness Center number 5 is likely going to occur somewhere in near Northwest Oklahoma City. There was a lot of conversation at the end of the MAPS 3 site selection process about where a fifth facility might belong. And so we completely anticipate that as MAPS 4 moves forward, that it will finish out that conversation. The interesting thing about the senior wellness centers is that you know, this will be the 5th senior wellness center that the MAPS office has executed. And so we've got a lot of information from those previous efforts. And so we think that we understand the process relatively well. The MAPS office understands the process relatively well. And so we really think that the MAPS 4 Wellness Center is probably going to move forward in a very similar fashion. There'll be a competitive operator selection process. And certainly all the lessons learned, all of the programming information, all of the budget information, everything that we've learned from the MAPS 3 wellness centers will move forward into the MAPS 4 program. We did want to identify for you here on this slide, there's a mention of an operating fund in the MAPS 4 resolution. And so, you know, obviously we're in the process of MAPS 3. You know, we've built 2 wellness centers. We're working on expansions. We're starting the 3rd one. The 4th one's coming right down the line. And so we spent a lot of time on wellness centers over the past several years. And so part of you may say, well, maybe we hit the pause button on wellness center number 5 because there's obviously a lot of needs in the community outside of wellness centers. But one thing that we wanted to highlight for you is the fact that the operating fund that's identified in the resolution supports not only the MAPS 4 senior health and wellness centers, but also all the others that are included in the system. And so all of that to say that obligating funds for this particular operating and maintenance fund, you know, should be considered within the context of the other facilities that are currently in operation. We're still working through what the mechanics of the funding request might be to the MAPS 4 trust. And so those things that are still being worked out to some degree. Beautification, this one has got a big laundry list of projects. We've identified here on, this is the first time that we've really sat down and do this, really kind of identify on a map all the different locations. I'm not sure that this is an exhaustive list, but touches on a lot of them. So as you can see, they're all over the city. We do feel like within that $30 million that the additional staffing is probably the highest priority in order to get that staff on and help get their involvement and help them so that they can help guide the process a little bit. We do anticipate that all the work that's listed in the resolution, and again, it's a long list, will be completed in conjunction with the program. So that's really good news. I do think it's important that the board understand that, you know, when you start to identify specific corridors, I think it's really easy for a person to envision a streetscape-like project. And so I think just due to the fact that there is a lot of projects here, there's a lot of work to be accomplished, that, you know, the scopes of these projects may ultimately be a little bit less extensive than a streetscape-like project. And so I think it's important to understand that, I think, going in, that, you know, there's only so many dollars that are identified here. And so it will be important that we distribute them in a way that everything can get executed. There is a lot of language in the resolution that I think, and the resolution is a great guide, but there's language in the resolution on the beautification project in particular that talks about city entrances, gateways, public art, monuments at key intersections, low maintenance landscaping at key arterial streets. So there's some language in the resolution on this project that is a little bit vague. And so we really feel like we're going to need some subcommittee input in order to move these particular components forward. And so that's something to think about as we're putting the plan together. Lastly, the animal shelter. And so for those of you that don't know, John Gary came and visited with us. Obviously, there's an existing animal, or the city's existing animal shelter at Southeast 29th and Bryant in Southeast Oklahoma City. So we've highlighted it there for you on the map. Just some things to be aware of. There is a lot of other things going on that property or adjacent to that property. There is Oklahoma City Police Department impound facility to the north. There's also a humane society located on the property, pet cemetery. There's a lot of barns and pens. And so there's a lot of things going on around the main building that'll have to be considered as we move that project forward. And we do anticipate right now that the new facility is likely going to be located in close proximity to the existing facility. So we'll need to think about all of these different elements as we work on that design. I will tell you the budget for this project, based on our understanding, it was informed, but really by peer facilities from all over the country. And so from our perspective, we do feel like the budget is more than adequate. We feel like strongly that we're going to be able to accomplish whatever that we need to in order for this facility to meet the requirements of the city long term. And so really excited about this project. And I really like that picture of that dog. He's a good boy, I can tell. So I think that's it. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. I apologize that it took so long to get through that. As I said before, it's a lot of projects. So anytime we talk about all the projects at once, it takes a while to get through them. So thank you for your patience.
Jason, thank you for taking us through that, because it's really helpful for this group to get even just a summary. And I know you went through that quickly and summarized hours and hours and hours of meetings, but it's really important for us to understand and have the information and input from the advocate for each of the projects and those that are living closest to those issues. So thank you for that. But with that, I'll open it up to questions. So Bob, you're unmuted. Are you ready?
I don't have a question. I didn't realize I was unmuted, so I'm going to mute myself.
No, that's just kind of my little Zoom cue that somebody's ready to speak. So Shay, did you have a question or comment?
I had a general question, not necessarily about well, sort of related. I was wondering if there was any update on subcommittees.
I'll take that one. So the mayor and I, as we've talked about the putting together of the implementation plan, what we don't want to do is appoint subcommittees and then them meet for 3 or 4 months and not have any action. And so we've kind of pushed that off a little bit to align in timing with when the implementation plan will be presented to this body and then to the city council, so that the subcommittees, when they're appointed and start meeting, can begin working. So we're probably looking at summer now, just trying to be respectful of people's time.
Thank you.
You bet. Other questions? Jason, you did such a great job. I think you gave us more than we even knew we needed. Thank you so much for your great work.
You bet. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so moving on to item 6, discussion items. I don't see that we have any discussion items.
We don't have anything else.
Okay, so item number 7, comments by board, staff, and citizen. Do we have any citizens signed up?
No, we have not had anybody sign up.
Right. So any comments by the board? No? Okay. Staff comments?
No, ma'am, nothing at this time.
Great. All right. Well, I appreciate getting to see all of you today, and hope you get to enjoy the beautiful weather today. And then after our little storm, and maybe spring is actually going to come this year. Okay, with that, we will adjourn and reconvene in April, and we will still be meeting Zoom. So we'll see you in April. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.